Things that you say, is it life or just play my worries away? You are the things I've got to remember. Shy away, coming for you anyway. Baby, are me that take me out. I'll be out in the day of love. We waited for this exit, this is what you're rested on this on I think hey, God, me, I'll be gone. Me. We got the dreamer's disease. Age 14, we got you down on your knees. So polite, you're busy still saying please. When night is falling, cannot find the light. You feel your dreams are dying. Oh, daddy, you got the music in you. I love music in you. One that's we ran a miracle mile. Flat broke, but hey, we do it in style. Bad rich, that's flying in for your trial. Oh, the wind when the night is falling. You cannot find a friend. You feel your dreams breaking just then. Oh, you got the music in you. I know the music and that's what's on you. Everybody, the music that you know. This whole damn world, you fall apart. You'll be okay. Follow your heart. I'm right behind. Now say you're mine. Oh, don't let go. You got the music in you. One dance left. This world is gonna pull through. Don't give up. You got a reason to live. Can't forget. We only get what we give. Oh, you got the music in you. That's what's wrong. If you got a reason to live, no, yeah, you got the music in you, that's what's wrong. If you got a reason to live, no, yeah. What I want you back, it might be hard to handle, but like a flame that burns a candle, the candle feeds the flame. What I got, full stock of thoughts and dreams that scattered, but then you put them all together, and I can't explain. Well, will you make my dreams come true. Now you make my dreams come true. On a night when bad dreams become a screamer, when I'm messing with a dreamer, I can laugh it in the face. Twist and shout my way out and wrap yourself around me, 'cause that ain't the way you found me. And I'll never be the same. Well, will you make my dreams come true. Well, you make my dreams come true. All the senators. Down on a daydream, all this sleepwalk should be over by now. I know that you make my dreams come true. Well, my dreams come true. Oh, now will you make my dreams come true. You, you make my dreams come true. Gazing at her from a window, staring at the sun, she just can't touch. If at any time he's in a jam, she'll be by his side. But he doesn't realize it hurt her so much. And all the brain just ain't helping that out. 'Cause he can't seem to keep himself out of trouble. So he goes out and he makes his money the best way he knows how. Another body laying cold in the dark. Listen to me. Go chase the waterfalls. It's like I know that you know maybe you're nothing there, but I think you're moving too fast. Little precious got a natural obsession with temptation, but he just can't see. She give him loving that his body can handle, and all he can say is, "Baby, it's good for me." One day he goes and takes a glimpse in the mirror, and he doesn't recognize his own face. His health is fading, and he doesn't know why. Three letters took him to his final resting place. Y'all don't hear me now. Chasing waterfalls. They should close to now. I know that you are. Too fast. Hey, man, I ain't chasing falling water, water chasing me. I pay it forward right before I make it pay for me. It's getting harder in this world of hate and blatant greed. I practice karma like a farmer, harvest patiently. Don't be atomic. Focus on what your causes. Every effect I causes, especially pregnant pauses. If you were target, then it probably means you got the juice. So watch your cup just runneth over for that haters too. Make them quench their thirst for you. Now they want to work with you. Meantime, you steady pressing forward for the sake of you. And algorithmic money making mogul paying dues. And now instead of haters hating, haters paying you. And it's a cycle triangular. And straying is dangerous. See, what I be praying for is always intangible, but always obtainable. The power of God is all I need. They don't fall apart. The work to do. Chasing waterfalls. Station used to now. Oh, you're moving so see out. No good chasing, baby. Stay where you used to. You're moving so fast. When you were here before, could look you in the eye, just like an angel. Skin makes me cry. Oh, like a feather in a beautiful world. So very special. Yeah, I wish I was special, but I'm a creep. I'm a weirdo. What the hell am I doing here? I don't belong here. I don't care if it hurts. I wanna have control. I want a perfect body. Want a perfect soul. Then I want you to know that when I'm not around, so very special. Yeah, I wish I was special, but I'm a queen. I'm a widow. What the hell am I doing here? Don't belong here. Well, she's right.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's 2 o'clock. My name is Robin Hicks. My pronouns are he, him. I am the Dean of the Faculty of Graduate Studies at the University of Victoria, and it's my great pleasure to be the Master of Ceremonies for the 3-Minute Thesis Western Canadian Regional Competition. So a warm welcome to all of you here in the room. We ordered up great weather for you, and welcome to all of you watching online. I'd like to start us off by acknowledging and respecting the Lekwungen peoples on whose territory the university stands, and the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich peoples, whose historical relationship with the land continue to this day. The University of Victoria recognizes that colonization and associated attitudes, policies, and institutions, including higher ed, have significantly changed Indigenous peoples' relationship with this land. UVic, the Faculty of Graduate Studies, and I personally pledge to hold ourselves accountable to Atol Nuel by respecting the rights of one another, being in the right relationship with all things, and by upholding the rights of Indigenous peoples. The work of a graduate student largely involves a proverbial deep dive in terms of developing expertise and working at or even redefining the cutting edge of an area of research. It's clearly very important for students to develop the capacity to converse amongst fellow experts in these fields, but it's also arguably, at least if not more important, to be able to share this expertise with those who are not experts, friends, family members, colleagues, the public, policymakers. At its core, the 3-Minute Thesis competition is about communication. It celebrates graduate student research while promoting communication, public speaking, and storytelling skills. The 3-Minute Thesis competition was created in 2008 at the University of Queensland in Australia. Competitions are now held in over 350 universities across 59 countries, including dozens and dozens of Canadian universities. How does it work? Well, the name of the competition pretty much says it all, or at least most of it. Students have a hard maximum of 3 minutes to explain their research in accessible lay language. Presentations exceeding 3 minutes are disqualified. Today's finalists are, of course, well aware of this, and they've all come through heats and finals at their own institutions, so I'm sure this is not going to be an issue. They will be given a 20-second warning by our timer. The presentations are spoken word and can be accompanied by a single static graphic image, which will appear on the screens to my left and right. Today's competition involves representatives from 17 different universities across Western Canada. I keep referring to this as a competition, and indeed it is. There will be prizes and awards for the top competitions, and these people sitting in the front didn't just pay extra to be here. They actually have some, they have the Herculean task of selecting the winners, and I would just like to take a moment to introduce them. First off, we have Maureen Sawa, who is the CEO of the Greater Victoria Public Library. Next to Maureen is Alexandra Darcy, our Associate Vice President Research at the University of Victoria. And our final judge is Cedric Littlewood, who is an Associate Dean in the Faculty of Graduate Studies here at UVic. So the judges will have to pick a first and second and third place winner. There are cash components to each of the first 3 placements. In addition, the first and second place winners will get to compete in the national 3-Minute Thesis competition, which will take place in Ottawa in November. Those of you in the audience, you also have some judging to do. We have an additional award for what we call the People's Choice winner. This will be determined through a Slido poll, and we'll provide some information on how that all works at the end of the presentations. And that goes for those of you who are present in the room and online. So without further ado, we're going to get started. I would ask that everyone put their cell phones on vibrate or silent, or leave them out of the room, or whatever it takes to not distract the presenters, particularly while they're in the middle of their presentations. Participant number 1 is Howie Simpson. Howie is a PhD student in the Department of Physics from the University of Alberta. And Howie's presentation is titled, Getting Atoms to Say Cheese as a Quantum Photographer.
Look at your hand. What do you see? Look closer. What if I told you you're looking at 10 million billion atoms? That's 10 with 25 zeros after it. In fact, everything from the chair you sit on to the air you breathe is made up of atoms. And there are so many of them that it's impossible to count in one lifetime. And yet, researchers can make computer chips so small, they're made with only a few hundred atoms. So small, we can't use regular microscopes to see them. So how do we see an atom? And how do we do studies at the atomic level? Well, my research uses a special microscope called the scanning tunneling microscope. And although this is going to sound sci-fi, it uses a phenomenon known as quantum tunneling. Now, quantum tunneling is fairly simple. Quantum essentially means really, really small, and tunneling just means to tunnel. Okay, let's say I have a boulder, and I need to get this boulder from one side of a mountain to the other. Now, I'm no Sisyphus, and I couldn't even start climbing a mountain, let alone push a boulder over it. But if I take that boulder and I shrink it down so much that it becomes quantum, the boulder itself can pass through the mountain to the other side, as if it's going through an invisible tunnel. And if my mountain was thinner, my boulder would have an easier time passing through that mountain. And that's quantum tunneling. And it turns out that electrical current, something we use every day to charge our phones, is made up of these tiny, tiny quantum boulders. And instead of tunneling through a mountain, electrical current can tunnel through the air. So if I take a really sharp piece of electrical wire, I bring it close to a sample I'm interested in without them touching, electrical current can pass from the wire through the air onto the sample. And if I hold that height and I start to scan in one direction, if there's an atom there, the tip and sample will become closer, or my mountain becomes thinner, and I get more electrical current. So I can scan a whole area, keeping track of the change of electrical current as I go, and I can generate a map of the atomic surface. Not only that, since I'm already using electrical current to make my image, I can use it to measure the electronic properties of materials at the same time, atom by atom. So not only do I create really cool pictures like the silicon next to me, but I can also look at emerging technologies that are coming out every day. Technologies like nanowires that are made of tens of atoms, but have huge implications in clean water and green energy solutions. Things like those computer chips, where I can take a single atom, pluck it out or move it around and see how that changes the electronic properties of the chip. Even things like superconductors, where fundamentally understanding how they work can help us solve problems like electrical transport. My research serves to understand how things work at the atomic scale so we can get them to work at our scale. And I can do it all with a simple picture. Thank you.
Hey, Howie,
Yeah.
I have a totally spontaneous question for you. Since you're already taking pictures of atoms, is it possible to put them together to make a movie?
That's an excellent question. Thank you very much. The quick answer is yes. Most movies are just made of pictures that you put together in a certain time. The problem is when you get down to the scale of an atom, things are happening like super fast, trillionth of a second long, that you just can't take a picture and stick them together. You won't see anything. It'll just look like this over time. But what we do in our lab, we actually do take pictures and movies of things, is we use a laser to basically inject some energy into the sample and another pulse, a special electromagnetic pulse that acts like a camera flash. And what it does is it freezes whatever's happening on the surface so we have time to scan. So what I can do is I can take before, during, and after pictures and then stick them all together, and then I get my nice movie where I can see If I plug something in, what happens to all that charge as it moves along the surface? So the answer is yes. I don't have another 3 minutes to tell you all about it, but we use laser pulses to get it done.
Great. Please join me in thanking Howard. Thank you. Participant number 2 is James Davis. James is a master's student in the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at Athabasca University. And James's presentation is titled, Gamified Learning is Underrated.
Do you remember being 13 years old, at school, in your desk, and bored? Bored to the point where it felt like your will to learn was being drowned to death in a pool of bland and uninteresting oatmeal? The most boring thing I could think of. Anyway, if you can't tell, I do remember that. And so when I became a junior high teacher myself, I wanted to save my students from the same fate. So I started using game elements in my lessons, like narratives and point systems. And when I did it right, it was magic. Learners were engaged. And so when I started my graduate studies and I began to research gamification, which is the use of game elements in teaching, I was surprised to find that what my practical experience told me was important did not match the research. Let me explain. If you take a look at my yellow visual there in the middle, this is an example of the gamification of this presentation. And it's kind of fun having a game up there, but it's not relevant, right? Shape finding, which is all that this game exposes you to, has nothing to do with the goal of this presentation that I am giving to you all right now in this very moment. It just doesn't. And so the problem is that it's this sort of non-relevant, middle-of-the-road version of gamification that research is primarily researching and reporting on. Problem is, if you just slap a game element into a lesson like this, the game does not match the goal. My research question is, what if the game does match the goal? What happens to engagement then? So I created an online learning module with 3 different activities, all on the same topic. One activity is like my blue image on the left there. It has no game elements. My second activity is like my yellow middle image, where it has game elements, but they are not relevant to the goal of the lesson. And my third activity has game elements that are relevant to the goal of the lesson. The difference in learners' self-reported motivation levels between doing those 3 different activities tells you everything you need to know. Now, if you take a look at my left or the rightmost kind of pink crossword puzzle that I have there, you too will understand what it is that I found out. And that is that with gamification, we can create lessons whereby what we have to learn is also what we want to learn. How great would that be? But this can happen if and only if those who use game elements to teach understand that relevance matters. Thank you.
Hey, James.
Hey,
I have a question.
I got an answer.
What is the highest quality use of gamifications that you've seen in education?
There is a teacher in Fort Saskatchewan, Alberta, named Scott Hebert. And what he did with his classroom, I sent him an email because I heard he was doing a lot of very interesting gamification things. And I went to see what he did in his classroom, and the entire thing is gamified. It's a grade 8 classroom. The students are extremely engaged. They, pretty much everything that you could think of possibly is gamified. They start out the year, there's no desks. They have to earn their desks by doing quests where they get wood and iron, and then they have to construct their desks that way, and they sit on the floor, and then they're up, and then it's a whole amazing, amazing process that I don't have time to fully explain, but when it's done right, it's so incredible the amount of engagement that students can have.
Very cool. Let's thank James again.
Thanks, everybody.
Participant number 3 is Mona Baruzian. Mona is in a Master of Science program in the School of Biomedical Engineering at the University of British Columbia. Mona's presentation is titled Young Athletes, Big Decisions, Improving How Clinicians Assess Re-Injury Risk Using a Novel Data Analysis Tool.
Imagine you're a clinician and a 13-year-old athlete sits in front of you. They've just spent 12 grueling months recovering from knee surgery. They're desperate to return to basketball. You must decide. Are they ready? You run them through the standard tests that stresses their knees, like this jump test. You analyze the crucial moment when they land. Can't spot any red flags, so you clear them to return to play. But weeks later, you find out they got injured again. This outcome is devastating for both patients and clinicians. Unfortunately, this is the case for 1 in 3 children who return to sport after knee surgery. How can this happen? The problem is injury risks aren't always obvious. 2 experienced clinicians might watch the same test and come to different conclusions. We have no objective way of spotting red flags as an athlete moves. That's why I'm creating a better approach, one that removes the guesswork. Here's my research in 3 steps. First, I'm collaborating with the BC Children's Hospital to precisely measure how their patients move. Instead of relying on a clinician's eye or video footage, I'm using motion capture technology. This tech lets me track full body movement frame by frame, generating over 100,000 data points per athlete. Second, I'm distilling all this data down into useful insights. To do this, I'm using a processing method called principal component analysis in a way that hasn't been done before. What makes this tool powerful is its ability to detect movement patterns that may signal injury risk. The naked eye can't always catch these patterns. Third, I want to identify what these re-injury risks actually are. By following athletes over time, I can connect their movement patterns to real injury outcomes. This can provide clinicians with a practical set of criteria to improve their decision-making. Half of children who undergo knee surgery never end up performing at the level they used to, and some never play again. With over 5 million children suffering from sports-related injuries each year in the US alone, the need for better injury prevention has never been greater. But the impact of my research does not stop there. By improving how we assess movement, we can prevent injuries from head to toe, even for beyond sports. My end goal is to scale this approach beyond the clinic, to make injury prevention accessible to all, because no one should suffer from an injury that we had the power to prevent. Thank you.
Hey, Mona,
Hey.
what drew you to studying injury prevention in young athletes?
Oh, wonderful question. Well, I had the honor of working at the BC Children's Hospital for a couple of years in their motion capture lab. And it was here where we saw this patient population dealing with this real issue, having a really hard time screening them and making sure they don't get re-injured. And I feel really lucky because it combines all of my passions and values. I love kids, I love sports, I love engineering, and I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Let's thank Mona again. Our 4th participant is Sarah Click. Sarah is a Master of Science student in the Department of Physical Therapy and Department of Psychology at the University of British Columbia, Okanagan. Sarah's presentation is titled Imagining Recovery, the Brain's Response to Motor Imagery After Stroke.
By a show of hands, how many people in this room have either been directly affected by a stroke or know somebody who has? Just look around. As we know, a stroke is a life-threatening condition that happens when part of our brain doesn't receive enough blood and oxygen. And without this steady supply, brain cells die, causing damage that can lead to lasting impairments. One of the most devastating consequences of a stroke is our loss of movement. In fact, 85% of stroke survivors suffer with chronic loss of movement in their arms and hands. And rehabilitation is essential, but here's the problem. Clinical guidelines are recommending a minimum of 3 hours of rehabilitation a day. but it's alarming that the actual time scheduled for therapy is considerably less, sitting at 1 to 1.5 hours, with time dedicated to the arms and hands sitting at only 8 minutes per session. And why? Lack of staff, resources, and time. But our friends and family deserve better. So one way to address these issues is to use something called motor imagery. Put simply, motor imagery is the imagination of a movement without actually moving. So imagine yourself opening a door that's familiar to you. Now, what's fascinating is when you actually open that door, your brain activates certain areas to control that movement. And when you imagine yourself opening the door, your brain activates those same areas without any physical movement. Now, this makes motor imagery an incredibly powerful tool, but here's the kicker. Brain activation patterns during motor imagery look different across individuals who have experienced a stroke, and no one knows why. So I set out to answer this question. I studied brain activation patterns during motor imagery in stroke survivors, compared males and females, as well as looked at how motor imagery practice changes these brain activation patterns. And to do this, I took pictures of their brains while they imagined themselves opening a door. I found that females have a more organized and efficient pattern of brain activation during motor imagery compared to males. Let's think of it like this. It's kind of like sending a text. So females are connecting to those large, efficient cell phone towers in big cities, while males are connecting to many smaller, less efficient cell phone towers in remote locations to do the same job. But what's exciting is that with motor imagery practice, both males and females are able to connect to those big city cell phone towers, improving motor imagery's efficiency. But why does this matter? If we're able to understand the differences in brain activation patterns during motor imagery in stroke survivors, we can tailor rehabilitation efforts to the individual, improving recovery outcomes. And motor imagery doesn't require any direct supervision or equipment, so stroke survivors can practice at home, potentially accelerating their recovery beyond that of physical therapy alone. And at the end of the day, our goal remains simple: to give our friends and family their best chance at regaining movement and independence. And with motor imagery, we may have found the way to do just that. Thank you.
Hey, Sarah,
Yeah.
how do you know that the people in your study are actually performing motor imagery?
That's my favorite question. I use something called functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI. So in the scan, I see changes in oxygenated and deoxygenated blood in the brain. So when you're thinking of something, your brain attracts a whole bunch of oxygen, and then we can pick that up in the scanner. And so previous research has shown that there's certain areas involved in motor imagery. And so when I go back and look at my scans and at my participants kind of at the individual level, I'm able to cross-check, okay, yep, these people are activating this area. Yep, they were doing motor imagery.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Our fifth participant is Parker Volk. Parker is a PhD student in the Department of Physiology and Pharmacology at the University of Calgary. And Parker's presentation is titled Friend and Foe: Looking for New Anti-Inflammatories from Parasitic Worms.
Imagine for a moment that you are a tapeworm. You are a master of living in the human body and avoiding the immune system. You've had millions of years to adapt and learn new tricks. You are amazing. You are ingenious. You are hated. Doctors try to get rid of you, and people find you disgusting. However, things are changing. Researchers are more interested in you. Why? They need you. The human immune system has gone haywire. The body attacks itself, and medicine can't do much about it. That's where you come in. Researchers want to learn from you, to understand how you've perfected calming the host immune system. Suddenly, people like you and think maybe you're the cure for their ills, though admittedly still pretty gross. You've become both friend and foe. Parasitic worms have plagued humanity for thousands of years, but since the 20th century, infection rates have dropped dramatically. At the same time, though, we are facing a new health threat: autoimmune disease. These are diseases where the body attacks itself, like allergies, diabetes, and celiacs, and they are becoming increasingly common. we all know someone with one of these lifetime illnesses and how they suffer, with strict diets, chronic pain, or worse. There were few treatments or cures for these illnesses, leaving researchers such as myself looking to worms for new solutions. As you'll remember from your time being a worm, they are masters of controlling the host immune system, and these tricks could become future drugs. My lab studies the rat tapeworm and its effects on key immune cells called macrophages. We have shown that our worm produces products that control macrophage behavior, and now we are searching for what these products are, with one strong contender being extracellular vesicles, tiny fat-bound packets of bioactive material, kind of like worm presents. To test this, we culture the worms in a dish and collect their vesicles. We then take macrophages, those immune cells, and make them sick like an autoimmune disease. If they get better after treatment with the vesicles, and my early data suggests they do, the vesicles could become a future therapeutic, something taken weekly to control inflammation. So if your partner or spouse ever asked you, honey, would you love me if I was a worm? You can reply, not really, but some weird parasite guy from 3 Minute Thesis sure would. Thank you.
Hey, Parker.
Howdy.
Why the interest in worms?
Not the first time I've heard that question. So parasitic worms really interest me for a number of reasons. The first is, frankly, they're a lot bigger than a lot of other infectious organisms like viruses or bacteria. Our worm, the rat tapeworm, it's about yay big. You can see it. It looks like rice noodles. And like that organism is living inside of the host, surviving, thriving, stealing food, which is just fascinating to me. As well, parasitic worms, they like to establish long-term chronic infections. It's not like many bacteria or viral infections where you get sick and then your immune system flushes it out. These worms want to hang out inside you, steal your food or your blood, not cause you too much damage because then you can't provide them with nutrients. And during that time, they're in this constant struggle with your immune system, and it's an arms race between the worm's evolutionary abilities and the host immune system. So if anyone wants to hear more about this, feel free to talk to me. Always happy to talk about it.
Great. Thanks, Parker. Again. Participant 6 is Natalie Krizan. Natalie is a Master of Science student in the Department of Geography and Environment from the University of Lethbridge. Natalie's presentation is titled Laser Beam in the Burns: How the Past Informs the Future of Forest Fire.
My research involves shooting lasers out of airplanes at recently burned forests in Jasper National Park. Sounds pretty cool. To explain why it's important, though, first I need to take you on a little bit of a trip through time. If we look at the forests in Jasper around 200 years ago, we see that fire is common. These forests need fire. It's a rejuvenating force on the landscape. It's like giving the forest a facelift every few decades that keeps it young and fresh. Fast forward around 100 years, fire disappears from that timeline. Folks in the early 1900s viewed fire as damaging, and they worked to eliminate it from the landscape to protect forest health. The ironic thing about that is that it's actually that act of removing fire from these forests that are adapted to it that puts the forest health at risk. Over time, they grow old, dense, homogenized. This decreases their resilience and puts them at risk to things like insect infestation. If we look at Jasper, we see exactly that play out. A century without that much-needed fire was followed by a pine beetle invading the area, spreading through the park for over 2 decades and killing off large patches of trees. And then it burned. And because of those altered conditions, it burned severely. So now we're here, shooting laser beams at the burnt forest. That laser technology is called LiDAR, and it lets me build a detailed 3D model of the landscape from the ground all the way to the tops of the canopy. And the cool thing about Jasper is I have one of those models from before the fire and from after the fire, so I can compare the two. I can look at the post-fire to figure out which areas burned more severely. And I can use that pre-fire model to figure out why. Was it areas that were impacted by the pine beetle ahead of time where the trees were dead? Was it areas where maybe the trees were denser and the fire could move more rapidly through, that the fire effects were more severe? Answering these questions is incredibly important because it's going to allow us to identify other areas at risk of severe burns just based on their forest conditions. For human communities within those forests, that information is critical. Think about places like the town of Jasper, Kelowna, Yellowknife, Lytton. All of these have been recently impacted by the type of severe fire that I'm talking about. Now think about a place like Banff or Whistler or Whitehorse, where there hasn't been a recent burn, but those same forest conditions persist. For protecting those communities, being able to identify areas ahead of time that would be suitable for preventative mitigation efforts is incredibly important. Things like thinning out tree stands or applying prescribed burns can greatly reduce the severity of a future fire in those areas. And that's what my work aims to do. This might sound like a cheesy line out of some movie about time travel, but the future is whatever we make it. My work is going to help us ensure that future forest fires are rejuvenating forests once again. Thank you.
Say it with me. Hey, Natalie,
Hey, Robin.
how is information about historical fires collected?
It's a really good question.
I know.
Couldn't have written a better one myself. It's kind of the foundational part of my thesis. So it's some work that one of my co-supervisors had done. Was dendrochronology is one of the ways that they collect it. So he had gone into the area that I'm working in by happenstance before it burned and took core samples into trees. And then you have all of the rings of that tree. So you know how old it is based on the year that it is now. And the cool thing about some of those old ones, like we see a lot here, like the Douglas fir and stuff like that, is you can get those fire scars within that. And then based on the age of the tree, the year that it is now, you can date the fire history and kind of get an idea of when fires occurred in the past, even the severity of the fires that occurred in the past. And that is kind of what I'm basing my thesis off of. It's a jumping off point. Is that timeline that I was talking about was built based on that type of work, that dendrochronology. So we know that there's been this extended amount of time where you would have expected there to be fire based on the climate, but we aren't seeing fire. And that's where you have that anthropogenic influence, fire suppression and exclusion. So, yeah.
Very cool. Let's thank Natalie again. Participant number 7 is Hannah Zhang. Hannah is a PhD student in the Department of Physiology and Pathophysiology from the University of Manitoba. Hannah's presentation is titled Lipids as Early Markers of Cardiogenic Shock.
Celine Dion once famously sang about her heart going on in the iconic movie, The Titanic. But why exactly is that important for each and every one of us? Well, we've all heard the stats on how heart disease is one of the leading causes of death worldwide, how it kills 14 Canadians every single hour. But what is actually happening, and why is the death rate still so high in the modern age? It all comes down to the fact that every organ in our body is dependent on the heart's ability to pump blood. So when it fails, the heart is just the tip of the iceberg because the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, the brain, they're all at risk. And this multi-organ failure is a deadly condition that we call cardiogenic shock. In fact, cardiogenic shock is the #1 reason why patients will die in the hospital of a heart attack. And although a lot of research has gone into understanding this condition, nearly half of these patients will still be dead within 30 days. The main reason for this is the inability to predict which patients will develop cardiogenic shock, and therefore the aggressive, life-saving therapies that are needed are often given too late. Now, imagine there was something that could alert doctors of impending disaster. A single blood test that could immediately change the course of treatment for high-risk patients and save their lives. Let me tell you a secret. Lipids are the key to this crisis. Now, many of you may already be familiar with some of the more common lipids like cholesterol, but there are actually thousands of different types of lipids floating around in our bodies, and they can fluctuate very quickly due to different stresses. This means that, like a ship's lookout, lipids can be used as early warning signs for specific conditions, including cardiogenic shock. Using innovative lipid measuring technologies, I've analyzed the blood of nearly 300 heart attack patients from when they first arrive at the hospital. Through this, I have identified a specific type of lipid that is strongly associated with both organ damage and poor heart function. And perhaps even more importantly, these lipids are able to accurately predict in-hospital mortality. This finding is both revolutionary and critical because it allows doctors to avoid the catastrophe of cardiogenic shock with just a simple blood test, saving hundreds of thousands of lives each year. With this new lipid-based marker, we can change the bleak narrative of cardiogenic shock to one of hope, so that the next time you or someone you love has a heart attack, not only will the heart go on, but the rest of the body will go on too. Thank you. Hey, Hannah.
We've got 10 more of these. Work with me. Hey, Hannah, what are your career aspirations?
Yeah, that's a great question. So obviously, as I'm sure you guys can all guess, I'm really interested in heart research. I love cardiovascular diseases, metabolism, and also, there's a huge rise right now in omics-based technologies. So I'm really interested in using that aspect of precision medicine to further advance cardiovascular diagnosis, treatment options, et cetera. But also, I'm really fortunate to be part of the MD PhD program at the University of Manitoba. So I'm also hoping to one day become a clinician in this space as well, hopefully be able to answer some really clinically relevant research questions to keep my research applicable to the general population and also hopefully help with patient outcomes. So yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
So thank Hannah. The 8th participant is Hannah Tench. Hannah is a Master of Science student in the Faculty of Environment at the University of Northern British Columbia. And Hannah's presentation is titled, Hatching Failure in Tree Swallows is Due to Embryo Death, Not Infertility.
As a bird biologist, I want the birds that I study to succeed. But sometimes the eggs they lay just don't hatch. Now, if I take an egg that failed to hatch and I open it and find a dead embryo, then I can say, okay, this embryo died. But if I open that egg and I don't find anything, did an embryo die, or was the egg never fertilized? It's an important question because different factors can lead to these two outcomes. If the egg was never fertilized, there might be a problem with the sperm. Perhaps the male was shooting blanks, if you will. If the embryo died, there might have been a genetic mutation, or the surrounding environment may have been too hot or too cold. But embryos can die very early in development, before we can see them with the naked eye. So these eggs need fertility testing, something that has not been done very often in wild birds. I studied tree swallows, which, like many other bird species, are declining across Canada. Tree swallows are important to us because they eat flying insects like mosquitoes, flies, and other pests. I monitored 1,000 eggs over 2 years, and 10% of them failed to hatch. So I wanted to know, were embryos dying, or is there an infertility problem? To answer this question, I waited until each female had been sitting on her eggs for 4 days, and then I checked on her embryos using a process called candling. I placed each egg in a dark environment and illuminated it with a flashlight. If the embryo was alive, I would see thick blood vessels and a little beating heart. If the embryo was dead, the blood vessels would be thin with no heartbeat. But many of these eggs just had an empty yolk with no blood vessels and no embryo, and these are the eggs I collected for additional fertility testing. I cracked open each egg and took the germinal disc off the yolk, which is a small protein patch that protects the ovum while it's waiting for a sperm cell to swim in and fertilize it. If fertilization is successful, then by the time the female lays that egg, there will be thousands of embryonic cells within that little disc. I added a special blue dye that binds to DNA and glows under fluorescent light. So if there were embryonic cells, I would see a beautiful bright blue constellation under the microscope. And this would tell me that the egg was fertilized. Across all the eggs I collected, not a single one was missing these bright blue cells, which means the fertility rate of these eggs was virtually 100%. So I determined for the first time that hatching failure in tree swallows is due to embryo death, not infertility. And other bird biologists can now use this information to determine why embryos are dying and if this is impacting the species decline. Thank you. Oh, question.
Oh, wrong question. How have bird biologists assessed fertility in the past?
Yeah, so in the past, both bird biologists and poultry farmers and even backyard chicken farmers, they might have opened up an egg that didn't have a developing embryo, and they would have looked at the germinal disc and the shape. So if it had smooth edges, they would say that's been fertilized, and if it had more irregular edges, that was classified as infertile. But the problem with that is it's not a very accurate method, and also if your egg sits there for a long time in the heat under the female, your yolk starts to degrade, and then you can't see that germinal disc anymore. So with this method, I'm also able to look under the microscope and find little pieces of germinal disc, and then I can still apply the blue dye and still find those embryonic cells, so it's a lot more accurate, and you're able to do this on eggs of all different types of disintegration.
Excellent. Let's thank Hannah again. Our ninth participant is Bailey Hack. Bailey is in a Master of Social Work program in the Faculty of Social Work at the University of Regina. Bailey's presentation is titled Journey to Anti-Racist Education.
I want you to look at the screen beside me. You see a word of greeting from a variety of languages from around the world, some of which are spoken by the thousands of children who immigrate to Canada every year. Now, imagine trying to learn a new language in a new country. This is where schools can play an integral role in the immigration process, as it's often the first place newcomer children learn French or English. But more than that, it's where they build their first connections and friendships in Canada and start to learn Canadian culture and norms. But for many students, schools are also a place where they experience racism, and they may be marginalized due to their language, culture, or religion. And this can have detrimental effects, including mental health concerns, social isolation, and can even cause students to drop out. And these are big problems. This is why my research focuses on how an anti-racist education system could be implemented here in Canada. For my research, I interviewed teachers about their experience teaching newcomer students. Because in order to enhance anti-racist education, we first have to understand how teachers perceive anti-racist education, how they are currently implementing anti-racist approaches, and what barriers they face in this implementation. Now, understanding how teachers perceive anti-racist education is important because as classrooms in Canada are becoming increasingly diverse, a majority of Canadian teachers still look more like me, white. So many have never experienced racial discrimination themselves. So my goal is to understand what skills, training, and resources teachers need to feel confident navigating difficult discussions about race and creating an environment where students feel represented and respected. Now, including anti-racist approaches in the classroom can be done in so many different ways. For example, by including books and resources with representation around the world, or by challenging racial biases and stereotypes and discussing these impacts with students. By understanding what teachers are currently doing, it can provide much needed insight into how we can better support them. Because ultimately, teachers play a huge role in creating an inclusive learning environment. And this can lead to a school culture where students feel a sense of safety and belonging. Creating an anti-racist education system isn't just about teaching. It's about transforming schools and classrooms into spaces where every child feels a sense of safety, belonging, and they feel empowered. Thank you.
I give you a B for that. Bailey, what inspired you to take social work at university?
Great question. Thank you. I think what inspired me is I originally started working in the child welfare system and then went into social work while I was working there. But I think social work just really aligns with my personal values. Social work is really great at not just looking at the individual person as the problem or the issue in their lives, but really focusing on some of those other levels, including macro levels like governments and systems and cultures, and racial discrimination, all of these things. And I think that just really aligns with how I see the world and my own values. So I've decided to continue on with social work for that reason.
Awesome. Thank you, Kaylee, again. Participant number 10 is Jacqueline Mellison. Jacqueline is in a Master of Arts program in the School of Social and Applied Sciences and Humanitarian Studies at Royal Roads University. Jacqueline's presentation is titled God and I Are Good, Finding Spiritual Health After Conflict Between Sexual Identity and Non-Affirming Christianity.
Sex and religion, two controversial topics that are best to avoid if you don't want to offend your audience. My thesis addresses these uncomfortable topics because it is necessary to confront injustice, in this case, faced by sexual minorities who grow up in certain Christian churches. It is not controversial to say that a community where homosexuality is taught to be caused by sin creates internal conflict in lesbian, gay, and bisexual people. Even Christian researchers who hold these beliefs conclude that the burden on LGBT people in their churches is unjust. My qualitative research is about how this internal conflict is resolved. When a person is taught that their sexual identity is the result of sin, what does it take for them to feel at peace with their sexuality and their spirituality? I interviewed 11 people who have navigated this journey in different ways. I applied tools from insight and storytelling methods to understand how this internal conflict was reconciled. Using storytelling as a method of research, I wrote about how for Carl, music was the enduring gift from his harmful church background, saving his life and his faith. Naomi's story is written in the form of a sermon, calling out the harm she continues to experience in her church, despite choosing a life of celibacy because of her beliefs. Darcy's story is a letter to their childhood self about how they spent so much of their life embarrassed that they had been a weird and spirited child, only to come to realize that it was their weirdness and spirit that ultimately saved them. Writing and analyzing these stories as a method of research led me to the finding that for people to come to terms with this internal conflict, they need just environments where they are emotionally safe and have a variety of role models to look up to. I discovered that each journey was a different narrative of establishing spiritual autonomy. Each person came to understand that their relationship with God and their spiritual life was in fact their own. For some, this meant finding a way to live in alignment with beliefs they had always held, but without consequences. Some people needed to leave their religion, either permanently or for a period of time, to discover possibilities for their lives they had not had the safety or opportunity to even imagine. A few people couldn't let go of the shame and fear they had internalized until an unexplainable, life-changing spiritual experience convinced them that God loves them just as they are. The reason I feel comfortable talking about sex and religion with all of you here today is because I'm not telling you what to think about God or even about your sexuality. What matters to me is that you and the people around you are able to decide for yourself what it is you sincerely believe. Thank you.
We'll get you there.
So spontaneous.
Do you think this research could apply to other topics or other groups of people?
Yeah, what a great question.
No.
I think the concept of spiritual autonomy can be just really applied to lots of places. Whenever there's a religious institution that's where's a group of people deciding what God is telling you, it's important that people are allowed to believe what they believe and teach what they believe. And my hope is that more of these organizations can stop getting stuck on the nitty-gritty of what God is saying to them and instead kind of take it back a level and ask who gets to decide what God is saying.
Great.
So
thanks very much. Participant number 11 is Catherine Avery. Catherine is a PhD student in mechanical engineering at the University of Saskatchewan. And Catherine's presentation is titled A Breath of Innovation, Combining 3D Bioprinting and Artificial Breathing Machines.
Before we begin, I want everyone to take a deep breath. Easy, right? But imagine if every breath felt like trying to pull air through a tiny straw. For millions of people suffering from lung disease like asthma, chronic infections, and the lasting effects of COVID-19, this is a daily reality. Lung disease is among the leading causes of death worldwide, yet developing effective treatments remains a challenge. This is because we don't have a truly effective way of studying the lungs outside of the body. And without an accurate model, developing treatments remains slow, expensive, and often unsuccessful. Two primary methods relied on by researchers for studying lung disease are two-dimensional cell culture and animal models. Two-dimensional cell culture refers to growing lung cells on a flat petri dish. But this creates problems because our lungs are, of course, three-dimensional. It also ignores the effects of lung motion from breathing, so you're missing that full picture. Whereas animal models, these are three-dimensional, and they do include lung motion, but their physiology or their lung structure is significantly different from humans. And this is what causes so many treatments that show promise in animal models to fail when tested on humans. So the common drawback that these methods have is that they're unable to fully capture the structure and the function of human lungs. My research is about developing a more accurate lung model by combining two advanced technologies. The first is three-dimensional bioprinting. Three-dimensional bioprinting allows us to bioprint human lung cells and biomaterials in a layer-by-layer manner to develop a three-dimensional structure that accurately reflects the anatomy of human lungs. But bioprinting alone isn't enough, because it still doesn't give us that lung motion from breathing, so we're still not getting the full picture. And this is where the second technology comes in. The second technology is what's called a bioreactor. A bioreactor functions like a mini artificial lung machine to recreate breathing motion and blood flow. So this allows us to keep our bioprinted lung models alive and functioning in an environment that mimics the human lung. So by combining these two technologies, I can develop a three-dimensional lung model that reflects the structure and the function of human lungs, something that current models are still struggling with. This type of model can greatly influence how we study and treat lung disease. It enables better drug testing, and it reduces our reliance on animal models, making research safer, more accurate, and more ethical. It can also bring us closer to personalized medicine, where doctors can test different treatments on a patient's own three-dimensional bioprinted lung to reduce treatment risks and maximize treatment success. Now take a deep breath again. Only this time, imagine a world where everyone can do it just as easily. That's what my research aims to achieve. Thank you.
Okay, come on. How do you fabricate your bioprinted lung models?
So the first step with our bioprinted lung models is actually to design the structure itself. And so for this, we use what's called a computer-aided design software. And so that software allows us to define the overall structure. Then once we have the structure, we make our biomaterial solution. So that's when we're combining those biomaterials with our various cell types. We then use an extrusion bioprinter. So an extrusion bioprinter just uses a pressure to extrude that material out through the needle to develop those different layers and come up with our overall three-dimensional structure. And by choosing different materials, structures, and cell types, we can replicate the architecture and cellular composition of human lungs. And we can also fine-tune different mechanical aspects like the strength and stiffness of our models to also match those of human lungs.
Very cool. Thank you. Participant number 12 is Yushin Cao. Yushin is in a Master of Arts program in the Department of Archaeology at Simon Fraser University. Yushin's presentation is titled Roommate Tension, Ancient DNA of Arctic Caribou and Muskox.
Do you have roommates? Well, I do, and I like her. But imagine if you have an annoying roommate who doesn't respect your boundaries. They eat all your food. They sleep in your bedroom without permission. You don't like it, but you can't do anything because you are bound to the same piece of land to eat and to sleep. Now, this tension between you two is just like a competition between two species. On Banks Island, in Canada's Northwest Territories, there are also two such roommates, caribou and muskox. The indigenous Inuit people on Banks Island told us
that these two animals have been competing against each other for food and habitat for a very, very long time. Sometimes their competition becomes unbalanced. That is, one population is winning the competition, taking away all the resources and increase in population size, while the other one is losing and declining. When this happens, the innovative ancestors would intentionally hunt the overpopulated species, so the two can eventually return to balance, continue to coexist, and continue to provide more vital food sources and food choices for the ancestors. This is a really amazing ecological management strategy, and it is clearly very important for Arctic ecology and indigenous food security. And it makes me wonder, what was the interaction between caribou, muskox, and humans like in the more distant past? I am looking for the answer from the archaeological caribou and muskox bones from Banks Island. Bones contain DNA. DNA can tell us about population size. For example, if high genetic diversity is found within the bones of a certain period, then there must be a big or an increasing population in this period, and vice versa. So DNA helps me to reconstruct population history. By comparing the two population histories together, I can see the extent and outcome of the past competition between these two animals. I am also comparing the two population histories with the archaeological timeline of human occupation to see the impact of the ancestors' ecological management. My project is the first ancient DNA analysis on Banks Island and on the topic of caribou-muskox dynamics. Furthermore, my project is a good opportunity for us to appreciate and support indigenous ecological management strategies. Thank you.
Hey, Yushin, I'm giving up on you guys. I actually have a two-part totally spontaneous question. How do you get the DNA out of the bones, and what's the significance of your project?
Thank you. For the first part of the question, how do you get the DNA out of bones? It is a classic question. And we all have DNA as living things in our cells, not just us, but also the animals as well, plants as well. All living things have DNA. And when the living thing dies, the body becomes decomposed, but the cells and the DNA can be preserved inside the bones or other organic materials. So as ancient DNA archaeologists, we collect these remains from the archaeological site and we bring it back to our lab. And then we clean it, and then we treat it with chemicals to break down the bones and release the DNA. And then we collect the DNA, and then we use some very fancy chemical reactions to amplify and sequence the DNA. And that's how we get the genetic information. And because ancient DNA is highly degraded and highly fragmented, so our lab space must be very clean and isolated from the rest of the building, so we are preventing the contamination from other resources like other human cells or bacteria cells from the background. So we all have to wear like bunny suit and hairnet, gloves, mask in the lab. Yeah, that's how we get DNA. It's a pretty complicated process. And in terms of the significance of the project, well, both caribou and muskox are very important for Arctic ecology and indigenous food security. They are the major prey for Arctic predators like wolves, and they also help with plant growth when they are trampling on the snow in the winter. And that trampling process generates heat that helps the snow to melt faster so the plant can grow better in the next year. And they're also very important in indigenous cultures and foodways. For example, the caribou population on Banks Island declined drastically in the early 2000s, and that caused a very negative impact on the local foodway of the Inuvialuit people on Banks Island and the local economy as well. So it is really important to keep these two populations in a relatively healthy level. And to do that, we need to know why their population changed. and how their population change so that we can better monitor their population change in the future. And in addition to competition and indigenous ecological management, I'm actually also looking at climate change as a factor that might influence the population level in the past. Yeah, that's a long answer, I'm sorry.
Okay, thanks, Yushin. Participant 13 is Purnima Gunasakira. Purnima is in a Master of Science program at the Bob Ghilardi School of Business and Economics at Thompson Rivers University. Purnima's presentation is titled Cell Phone Recollection in Kamloops, a Public Awareness Survey on Effectiveness.
Hello, everyone. Today, I will be talking about the effectiveness of cell phone recollection in Kamloops, a mid-sized city in interior BC, and why we should care about it. Almost 2 billion cell phones were replaced in 2024 globally, and if laid flat, this can cover 4,330 hockey rinks. Most of these replaced devices either end up in a drawer at home or they end up in landfill. So why should we care? Cell phones contain hazardous materials such as lead and mercury, and when improperly disposed of, these toxins can leak into soil and water. Lead exposure, even in very small amounts, can cause developmental issues in children. Mercury, on the other hand, causes memory loss and organ damage in adults. I think some of us are aware of these adverse effects up to a certain extent, but do you know why keeping your old cell phone at home is harmful for the environment? Well, cell phones also contain very valuable materials such as platinum, gold, silver, and copper, resources that are fast depleting. And retrieving these materials is not only about making new phones, but they're also essential for medical equipment such as MRI machines or pacemakers. So what do we do? The solution is pretty simple: reduce, reuse, and recycle. However, are people actually participating in cell phone recycling programs? To answer this, I conducted a survey with 225 respondents in Kamloops, and the results were quite shocking. 75% of the respondents were unaware that keeping your old cell phone at home was harmful for the environment, and the same percentage were unaware of the BC government-led cell phone recollection program in Kamloops. Even out of the people who were aware of the program, 76% had never participated. So this raises the question, why are people this reluctant to participate? The survey responses highlighted their concerns on data security as the main reason for not participating. Also, the lack of information on the programs and also the drop-off locations prevented them from participating as well. So how do we fix this? Using the survey responses again, I came up with 3 main actions that could increase the participation and the awareness rates. Firstly, we propose certified data wiping stations at all drop-off locations that would give a written guarantee on data security. And secondly, we propose collection trucks that would cover all neighborhoods of Kamloops every 6 months. And thirdly, we propose very structured and targeted awareness campaigns. If we can increase the convenience and the visibility of these programs, we can make sure that our old cell phones don't harm the environment, and instead it kind of contributes to a circular economy. So the next time you replace your phone, don't just stash the old one away, recycle and take action. Thank you.
Hey, Purnima, what were some of the challenges you faced while conducting the survey?
So I think among many, the main challenge was getting survey responses from the public, which was very difficult. So you would have many saying, oh yeah, I'll fill it. But they don't eventually, and it kind of feels invasive to say, you know what, fill it now. But I guess that was the biggest challenge, getting responses.
Great. Let's thank Purnima again.
Thank you.
Fourteenth participant is Janessa Glanz. Janessa is a Master's of Arts student in Counseling Psychology from Trinity Western University. Janessa's presentation is titled Goosebumps Are Good for Us.
In my opinion, the only thing more awesome than dinosaurs is space. And I want you to, this photo was taken by the Cassini spacecraft, which cruised through space for over 15 years, traveling about 1.4 billion kilometers from Earth to take this selfie beside Saturn. That arrow is pointing to Earth. That's us. That tiny little dot is everything any of us have ever known. I don't know about you, but that makes my head spin makes me take a breath. It gives me goosebumps, and it changes my perception of just about everything. This emotion that I'm feeling, maybe you're feeling it too, is awe, A-W-E. Awe is typically characterized by a perception of vastness that changes and shifts our existing mental frameworks, and experiencing awe has big impacts on our mental and physical well-being. Awe does things like settle our fight and flight systems. It decreases inflammation and increases oxytocin, but it isn't just a physiological state. It reshapes our very nature. For example, awe increases pro-social behaviors like generosity. It deepens our sense of meaning and strengthens our feelings of connection. Those goosebumps are good for us. However, despite these benefits and the therapeutic potential of this emotion, we have yet to look at the role of awe in therapy. And that's why I've set out to look at this emotion in this specific context. In my study, people who have engaged in therapy reflected on one impactful moment they experienced in their sessions. And then I asked them, what role, if any, did awe play in that moment and in therapy in general? The themes from these accounts confirm that awe shows up and plays a crucial role in those impactful therapeutic spaces. My participants talk about awe as something that is guiding them through therapy. For them, it's a source of hope and comfort, a source of clarity and acceptance. It's an emotion that both punctuates and motivates the changes that they're seeing in therapy. And I'm also analyzing the initial statements made when participants were asked to reflect on their impactful moment to explore the emergence of awe-related language. I want to know if awe shows up in those moments even before I ask about it. I'll integrate the findings from both these analyses to distill a theoretical framework that starts to describe how awe shows up in therapy. This research starts to contextualize a powerful emotion in a field that needs it. If therapists and clinicians could better understand and strategically tap into awe in therapeutic spaces, we would be tapping into a resource that we know has profound benefits. Life on this tiny little dot is hard and confusing. Mental and physical well-being are a constant struggle for everyone. And now more than ever, we need the emotions like awe that help us feel connected, that shift our perspectives, that show us the vastness and the excitement of existence, especially in therapy. Thank you.
Hey, Janessa, what implications do you see this research having on the future of therapeutic practices?
I'm so glad you asked. My hope with this research and research like it is that it'll eventually start inspiring changes in therapeutic practice, inspiring new therapy modalities, inspiring changes to existing therapy modalities, similar to the movement of positive psychology. So with positive psychology, we saw this shift from focusing on the negatives and pathology and shifted to only focusing on the positives and the good things and the strengths. And we saw a lot of good come from that. But a criticism of that is that it can have blinders on a little bit and only looks at the positive and ignores some of the negative things about life and experiences that need our attention. And awe is a unique emotion that has the capacity to host both the positive and the negative. You can look out on a big canyon and it can be uplifting and meaningful, and you can watch a tornado tear through a landscape, and that's terrifying. And both of those things are awe-inspiring and awe-inspired. So it's an emotion that has the capacity to integrate the positives and the negatives. And that's important in therapeutic spaces.
Awesome. Participant number 15 is Jade Fisher. Jade is a PhD student in the Department of Physics and Astronomy right here at UVic. Jade's presentation is titled Unearthing a Better Way to Treat Cancer.
Imagine you're a miner standing in front of a massive mountain. Below it lies a rich vein of gold. But how do you reach it? You need a tool that can cut through the rock, but without destroying the surrounding area. Use dynamite and you risk bringing down the whole mountainside. But use a pickaxe and you'll be slowly chipping away forever. You need a tool that is specialized for the job. Now instead, imagine we're treating cancer. Removing a tumor from the body is a lot like digging for gold. The cancer is valuable to remove, but we can't risk damaging the surrounding area, which is healthy, vital tissue. So we too need a specialized tool for the job. One such tool is radiation therapy, which delivers beams of highly intense energy able to obliterate cancer cells. But not all radiation acts the same. This is where my research comes in. I'm studying the potential application of a new form of radiation therapy called very high energy electrons, or VEEs for short, which could change the way we treat tumors in hard to reach places. The first feature about VEEs that make them so exciting is we could treat tumors at any place in the body, regardless of depth. We could treat the prostate, the liver, or the spine, no problem. But of course, depth alone is not enough. We also want precision. And VEEs, they act more like a laser rather than a flashlight. Conventional radiation, it enters the body and it scatters, making precise targeting difficult. But VEEs maintain their path, sharp and narrow, directly for the tumor. On top of this, VEEs are not affected by complex anatomy. As radiation passes through the body, it encounters pockets of air and areas of dense bone. And at these points, it can be deflected. But VEEs maintain their path, regardless of tissue type. So just like a miner would want their drill to cut through any type of rock, we need our radiation to do the same. And VEEs achieve this. But the most exciting feature about VEEs is their speed. A treatment given in clinic today will slowly chip away at that tumor over a period of weeks. With VEEs, we could deliver an entire treatment in the fraction of a second. By reducing the total treatment time, we reduce the burden on both the patient and the healthcare system. So with the depth, speed, and precision of VEEs, we have potential for a treatment that is both more efficient and more effective. So while miners have been refining their tool for centuries, now it is our turn to refine our tool. Except instead of aiming for gold, we're aiming for something better. We're aiming to give patients a better shot at life. Thank you.
Jade, what's one thing you wish more people understood about radiation therapy?
I think I'd like to dispel some of the fear around radiation therapy. I feel like it's really ingrained into public knowledge that radiation is a bad thing. And I wouldn't recommend you go home and swallow some plutonium, but there is a place for radiation and it can be really, really valuable in medicine. And we only use it at a point where the risk outweighs the benefit outweighs the risk. Goodness gracious. And that scientists have worked really hard over the last 100 years to get really good at making it as safe as possible for patients, and that it's at a point that I think the fears should be pretty minimal. And so that's what I'd like to tell the public.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jade.
Thank you.
Our 16th participant is Derek Robillard. Derek's a Master's of Science student in the Department of Geography at Vancouver Island University. Derek's presentation is titled Mapping Landforms Using LIDAR and Machine Learning.
You ever seen in the movies where a 3D face scanner scans someone's face to confirm their identity? Now imagine if instead we scan and analyze the surface of the Earth to identify types of landforms that require special management. Such ideas led to my research. In 2023, I was hired to help assess 20 important watersheds located in BC's Great Bear Rainforest. My job was to manually identify and map sensitive landforms, including fans and floodplains, places where streams actively erode and deposit sediment across valley floors. It was time-consuming, detailed work, and sitting in front of my computer, I thought, there must be a better, more automated way to do this. And well, thanks to support from VIU and the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada, I've been exploring that possibility. My research focuses on creating a clear, streamlined workflow for automated landform mapping using elevation data and machine learning, all within ArcGIS Pro, a popular program for mapping and spatial analysis. This work is now possible thanks to LIDAR, a technology that uses airborne laser pulses to create highly detailed 3D models of the Earth's surface, like that of my study area in the Coast Mountains. Currently, the BC government is planning province-wide LIDAR coverage by 2029, and the best part? The data is free. This creates a world of opportunity for advancements in how we model and manage the land. So how do I use that data to automate landform mapping? First, I transform it into a 2D image that really accentuates the landforms of interest. Then I apply an algorithm that divides that image into small segments, kind of like puzzle pieces matching features on the landscape. Next, I teach the computer which pieces to look for by giving it examples of landforms that I've mapped manually. Once it learns, it can begin to recognize and map the landforms more automatically. The goal is to make the process repeatable, reliable, and transferable to other areas of BC or even beyond. Currently, there's no standard end-to-end workflow for this approach. By filling that gap, my research aims to make landform mapping faster, more consistent, and more accessible, especially where it supports practical applications like watershed assessments and other sustainable land management practices. Because ultimately, this is about more than mapping landforms. It's about working smarter to protect sensitive areas while contributing to innovation in how we study and manage the land. Thanks for listening.
Might surprise you, but I have a question. What advice might you have for anyone who would be interested in pursuing this type of work and research?
I thought you'd never ask. Nobody used that one, so I thought somebody had. There was a couple different ways that I was going to answer this question, and I thought maybe to squeeze two, just to give the judges a bit of chance to scribble some notes in. So from a general perspective, I would say do your homework, because there's so much to know about GIS applications, and it's a field in its own right. So when you in a rabbit hole if you're not careful. And then from a more specific technical perspective, I would say if there's anybody on the odd chance who's ready to look into deep learning, advanced techniques, for example, mask RCNN neural networks, which as far as I can tell may well be the future of automated landform mapping.
That's great. Thanks, Derek. Our 17th participant is Rubina Gosal. Rubina is enrolled in a Master of Science program in the Department of Biology, Bioscience, Technology, and Public Policy at the University of Winnipeg. Rubina's presentation is titled Molecular Puzzles, Home Depot Buckets, and the Quest for a Fertility Agonist.
Hope is a quiet thing. It sits in waiting rooms, it's whispered in prayers, and it's a single pink line in tests that should show too. Infertility is more than a diagnosis. It's reality for millions of people. And for many women, it begins with PCOS, polycystic ovary syndrome, which is a hormonal disorder. We don't know the cause of it, there is no cure, and it's one of the leading causes of infertility. Scientists believe there are two key players in this, the follicle-stimulating hormone, FSH, and its receptor, FSHR. FSH is a hormone that plays a key role in how much estrogen women produce. When estrogen levels are too low for too long, it can lead to infertility. And this is a common symptom seen in PCOS that happens when FSHR isn't activated as often as it should be. So scientists are studying the receptor to see if we can find different ways to make it function, and my research does this through computer modeling. Imagine FSHR as a puzzle. It's missing one piece that we call a ligand that turns the receptor on when it's put into place. The problem is that pieces like that are lost in large chemical libraries. Imagine a huge Home Depot bucket, and the piece you're looking for is buried amongst millions of random pieces. But docking is a computer technique that lets us sort through these pails virtually. They let us test the pieces to see what fits, and it lets us do that rather quickly. But docking just captures snapshots in time, like pictures do, and proteins aren't statues. They move and twist, like rowdy children in a classroom. And while we often hope the smiling faces we see in school pictures are representative, I'm sure we can all agree they probably don't fully capture a typical school day. Videos do that much better. And for proteins, that's why we also use molecular dynamic simulations, because they let us watch things happen over time. So I can make sure my ligands aren't just a good fit for a single moment, but they're the right fits over a suitable amount of time. But finding promising molecules is just the first step. The next is bringing them to life. In the lab, I use the true smiles rearrangement, a reaction that reshapes molecules and forms new bonds, to build molecules that can activate FSHR, bridging the gap between an idea and a treatment. If this works, we aren't just solving molecular puzzles. And we're not just managing symptoms, we're restoring function and giving people something more to hold on to than hearing just keep trying. Science is about problem solving, it's about persistence, and it's about people and changing the way we live. I don't have all the answers to infertility, but what I do have is the opportunity to find some. Because when we push the boundaries of what we know, we don't just change molecules, we change futures. Thank you.
Rubina, what drew you to choose this as your thesis topic?
So for many years, I thought I had PCOS. Actually, I was starting to present with symptoms that were inconveniencing my life, and it oftentimes were very, very painful. And so I'm trying to figure out what's going on my own because I'm very shy and I didn't want to go to a doctor. And I see PCOS coming up time and time again. And I'm reading about it and I'm just like, oh, great. And my first thought was that I was worried that no one was going to take me seriously. So I pushed it down and I moved on, and I'm just about to finish my undergrad, but I'm saying the word PCOS more. I keep telling it to people around me, and it was really sad how often I would hear the women say, oh, yeah, I have PCOS. Oh, yeah, I know someone with PCOS. It was so common, and it is common. It's the world's most prevalent female endocrine disorder. And so I was carrying that with me. And so I'm about to enter grad school and I have PCOS on my brain. And my supervisor, very kind as she is and open-minded, she's like, Ruby, what do you want to do for your thesis topic? And I'm just like, what am I supposed to know? I just graduated from undergrad. And despite the fact that I'm in the bioscience program at UW, my research lab is organic synthesis. We're organic chemists. And so she's like, Ruby, is there a disease that you really want to try to cure? And I was like, well, is there ever? And goes from there.
Great. Thanks so much, Rubina. So if you've been keeping count, that was the final presentation. Now, during the Q&A, audience, you let me down a little bit, but I know it's because you were saving yourselves for this moment. So please join me and make some noise to celebrate the 17 fantastic presentations we've seen. I knew you had it in you. Okay. Our judges are now going to retreat to a private location. That's what it says. To decide the first, second, and third place winners. While they're doing that, those of you in the audience here and online have the opportunity to select the People's Choice winner. This will take a few minutes. We are doing this through Slido poll, and I see it's already up there. I believe this is the one for those of you in the room, and we'll just use the one. If you're watching from elsewhere, we ask you to vote using the slide for the region you're in: Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Northern BC mainland, and Vancouver Island. For our YouTube audience, we'll roll through the slides twice. So if you miss your region the first time, you can catch it the second time through, and we'll give 3 to 5 minutes for everyone to register their vote. You can obviously use your phone to scan the QR code, or go to the Slido site and enter the code that way. Okay, just announcing last call for the Slido poll, in person or online. Okay, the Slido polls are closing, and we will just ask for your patience while we compile the different regions and wait for the judges to return. So sit tight. Okay. We have made some decisions, and when I say we, I mean the judges. We're going to take a tag team approach. So I'll invite each of the judges in turn to come up and announce one of either the first, second, or third place winner, or the People's Choice Award. So I'll start with Cedric and invite Cedric to come up and announce the People's Choice winner.
Thank you. So it's my privilege to share with you not the judges' deliberations, but the result of your deliberations, both in this room and online. So without further ado, the People's Choice winner is Bailey Hack from the University of Regina.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Alex Darcy. I'm incoming Associate Vice President Research here at UVic, and it's my privilege to give you the name of our third place winner today. A note about this prize, it comes with a $500 check, not to be issued today, but soon thereafter. Okay, so I would like to give a very warm congratulations to Jade Fisher.
Thanks, everyone. Just a reminder, I'm a librarian. I'm the CEO for the Greater Victoria Public Library, and it's my privilege to give you the name of the second place winner, who will receive a check for $750 and also will be going on to the next finals. So I would like to congratulate Parker Volk.
I think you know who I am by now. I have the privilege of announcing the first place winner, who will receive a $1,500 check and will also go on to the national finals in the fall. And I'm delighted to announce the winner is Mona Baruzian. Okay, that draws the event to a close. I just want to start by once again offering my hats off to all the participants. You guys really rocked it today. Congratulations. Just a few more people to thank. The judges, I think, had the hardest job of anyone today. 17 really spectacular presentations, and they had to pick 3. So thank you, Maureen, Alex, and Cedric. You'll also maybe have noticed or not noticed several busy bees working behind the scenes or around the scenes. This is part of Team FGS in my office, best team on campus. No offense. But a special shout out to Danya Roberts, Danielle Kopp, and Lisa Pender. The tech support seems seamless from where I was standing. I hope everybody online felt the same. So thanks very much to Jeff and Jordan. And finally, a huge shout out to Yvonne Rondeau, who really was the driving force between virtually everything that led to today. So thank you. We have a reception starting at 4:30. 4:30-ish. It is in the Halpern Center, also known as the Grad Lounge. I don't know which direction it's in, but several of us who work here, Jade's going to lead the charge since she put her hand up. Hopefully those of you who are from UVic may be able to hang around and perhaps be a little bit of a tour guide to bring some of our guests to the center. There'll be some food and refreshments. I hope to see you all there. Thank you for coming. Thank you, students. Have a great afternoon.
I was calm, like I was already there. The ball was shit, was wicked. My heart was beating. You were thinking you should be calm. You should be calm tonight. Oh, let it fall. One of a kind, just a mind go by. Wanna know up close, or just another hole. Let a be like me, never coming back before. Hold me down. Please take another way. Cause the wall was shaking, the love was awakening, my heart was aching. You were making you. I can't control myself when you walk